Jack Pitts, and welcome back to the Making of podcast. Today, I'm joined by Dave Moorman. Dave spent 26 years building DynaSis, an Atlanta-based MSP, before selling the business to Novatech in 2019. After that, he reinvested into the combined company. From there, he became president and CISO at Novatech, where he helped scale the business across multiple states, worked through more than 10 acquisitions, and ultimately went through a second exit. But what I really liked about Dave's story is where it started. He began working at 10 years old and actually found his way into computers through playing in a heavy metal band. We get into entrepreneurship, culture, M&A, selling a business, and the lessons Dave picked up for more than 30 years in tech. Hope you enjoy this one. This is the Making of Dave Moore. Awesome, Dave. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, I know. Kind of crazy. I just reached out to you, like a week or two ago. You saw something on LinkedIn and now, we're recording a podcast together.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. I love reaching out and connecting with you young cats. You're the future of the world, and I'm just holding on here.
Hey, I'm trying to become as successful as you one day. That will be my goal. I don't know anything, but I'm trying to pick people's brains like yourself because, frankly, that's all it's about, getting your knowledge. You're obviously an expert in IT, MSPs, built businesses, sold them. I haven't done anything. So that's why I'm trying to, pick your brain and spend some time with you.
Yeah, no, it's smart. Believe it or not, it took me almost a lifetime to figure it all out. And I try to tell people when they're like, oh, how'd you get to that level? It's like, I went down the path many times and I know where all the snakes are and I know where all the gold is hidden, right? It's like Dungeons and Dragons and all I'm is what the path looks like at the end of the day, right? Yeah.
Totally.
What you will and put your own salt and pepper on it or modify it. And, but at least if anything, you got one other journey that you heard as you move through life. So it's pretty awesome.
Exactly. And it's like, I love just telling the stories of people's backgrounds, where they grew up, and would love to kind of hear your picture of, where you grew up, any of your first jobs that you had, sports you played, anything that kind of helps paint the picture for the audience on, who is Dave, where did he grow up, everything related to that would be awesome.
Yeah, no, I was born and somewhat raised as a young child in New Jersey, right outside of Manhattan on the Jersey side.
Nice.
Caldwell, New Jersey. So you probably never heard of that place, but it was where Tony Soprano lived in North Caldwell on The Sopranos. But pretty close, relatively close to the city, maybe 30, 35, 40 minutes away, depending on traffic, of course. But when I was 9, my father, who had lived there his whole life, loved Florida. So picked the family up, had a lot of courage at the time, moved us to South Florida, down to a little town called Jensen Beach, Florida, which is Stewart area, Jupiter, Hope Sound, kind of a little north of there.
Mm-hmm.
And he went out to the beach and went surf fishing every day. And that was his dream. And he decided to pass away about 2 years later at the age of 52.
Wow.
So my mother had never worked a job in her life. So she went and worked 3 jobs to keep the roof over her head and put food on the table. So I actually started catching mullet with a cast net, selling to the bait shops for 38 cents a pound when I was 10 years old. So
wow.
About 18 months ago, I'd worked my whole life since I was 10 and retired at 55. But now dipping my toe back into the water because I'm bored out of my mind.
Yeah, no, definitely get the, bored. And that's, very crazy, moving from Jersey, you're 10 years old. So your dad passed away when you were 12, is that right?
Yeah, 12. Yep.
Wow. That's crazy. And your mom, like figuring out a job, how was that kind of on like the household dynamics? Did you have any siblings? Was it just you and her? Like, must have been really tough.
Yeah, no, I'm actually 7 of 8. So a lot of siblings, most of them, 3 or 4 of them were gone at that point, but I was lived at home with 5 women. So my mom and 4 sisters, right? So only male in the house. Needless to say, it was awesome because I got my own bedroom where everybody else had to shack up in a little house in South Florida. But yeah, I know a lot about the ladies. Let's just put it that way. My wife says all the time, we were actually married 35 years just yesterday. And she says all the time when I meet other women and I start asking them maybe some not so comfortable questions, he's like, he's got 5 sisters. So yeah, he's not embarrassed. So
yeah, you grew up with it. I only have a brother and I guess a sister dog, but nothing as close to you. So, like, what was kind of, you obviously started selling fish. Any other kind of side hustles you did, to help contribute to the family, or just like, hey, stuff you found interesting
Yeah,
in high
I
school?
got into shucking oysters and then working in restaurants and pizza shops and then seafood restaurants. And then, I say the end, I was 18, 19 years old. I was running a couple of small French bistros. So I got a cooking background, love to cook. My wife does too. So that's one of our hobbies. We still cook to this day.
Nice.
Then, played sports in high school, football, baseball, basketball, back when you could do those kind of things. Also grew up racing motorcycles. So
Oh, wow.
started out, racing BMX bikes, then got into dirt and then got into road. So I've run some of the more known, tracks like Mid Ohio and Laguna Seca and those kind of tracks when I was a teenager. But I wasn't great at it. So got out of that. The restaurant business is very difficult. So decided to not do that. But I also played in a heavy metal band. I'm a bass guitarist for the last 45 years. And that's how I actually got into computers, believe it or not.
Oh, wow. Was it one of the, bandmates that you were with, or like, how did you get into computers?
Yeah, so
Especially
this
kind of in the 90s, that's
Yeah, it was 1984, and the guitarist in the band, we had a guitarist and a drummer and a singer, and the drummer quit, and the guitarist had the first ever Apple Macintosh, the 512K, and
wow.
on it, it had a program called Mac Drums. And so I learned how to program it to be the drummer in the band until we found another drummer. And that's how I got into computers, literally. I wasn't in school. It was playing in a heavy metal band in 1980. Yeah.
That's crazy. Honestly, that might be one of the best. Hey, like, this is how I kind of stumbled into my career. And so you kind of get into that, like, you learn programming there. And is it kind of just you're obsessed? You're doing it on the side for fun? Like, what?
Yeah, I mean, that was, when my father passed away, my mother bought me an Atari, the 2600. So that was the first popular Atari. There was one or two models for that weren't very mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Love the technology. I've always been into tech. I'm into audio systems and just tech in general. And so, just got into that, got into music, and just kind of went from there, and just started charting a course, figuring it out. Like we talked about, earlier, I didn't have any mentors growing up. The only mentor I ever had was the CEO of my last company, Novatech,
Wow.
that I was part of. Never really had any mentors in my life. Just kind of figured it out on my own.
Yeah, that's something. What'd you say there? Sorry.
Without Google.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine doing anything without like Google or ChatGPT. Sometimes I feel like it's bad, being so overly reliant on this. And I know it's definitely not great for my brain because, you got to have that, hey, like, I can truly think for myself. Obviously, I do have those skills, but, definitely a reliance issue is something that's going to happen for, these people who are, in high school and middle school, and AI is going to be even more a part of their everyday life right now.
Yeah, I think if you utilize it like the way I'm using Claude today is all about going down knowledge rabbit holes, right? And so I get to ask it the questions on things I want to know, and it responds back to me. It's almost like having instant access to the information you want on a big old school encyclopedia set, right? So I think it can enhance knowledge and intelligence, at least for the ones out there that are using it and leveraging it, right? There's a lot
Totally.
younger
Totally.
society right now that doesn't know anything about it, and that's can be scary. Now, if you're working in the physical world and you're a nurse or you're a welder or you're an AC repairman or in construction or a car mechanic, fine. You probably don't need to know it as much. But if you're in a knowledge related field, I think getting your arms around AI and where it's going is going to be a huge advantage. I'll get into it.
Totally. And I totally agree. And that's why I'm really happy with what I'm doing, building a software business, you know, primarily using vibe coding. And it's like, I'm having Claude teach me as well. So it's like, hey, it's obviously doing all this stuff that I could never do, but, teaching me understanding like the logic and infrastructure. I kind of think that's going to be the next big wave. And it's interesting. Some of my friends who are, knowledge economy workers, like consulting, it's like they haven't really even touched it. They only use Copilot, and they're more using it as just like a chat bot, which is just, scary. I'm not kind of on the doomerism side of things, but you never know. Like, why would you pay, someone 120K when you could, easily, outsource that to an AI model.
Yeah, I had this conversation with my son last night. He's 29, lives in Chicago, probably close to where you are. And he's in consultancy and does data analytics, very specific kind of vertical, which is pricing analytics. 2 jobs ago before that in Atlanta here, he did all the pricing for Buffalo Wild Wings across the whole US, right? You think, oh, well, that's easy. But every market has a CPI index, different labor costs, different rent per square foot costs, local beers, I think his data set when he worked at that company was like 8 million rows, right? So you think like, oh, it's easy. But
Wow.
we were just talking about this topic last night is like, I was explaining to him, I think as long as you learn and become an expert in your niche, then, AI is the backhoe that helps you get to the answers quicker for the customers in consultancy anyway. But I don't know if it's in the next 10 or 20 years going to replace that consultant in the room that's my age that's got 30 years of experience in different verticals. You know what I mean? Like I just don't
Yeah,
know that yet, but it's definitely moving at warp speed. So we'll see.
totally. And also another thing I feel like with a lot of it is like, hey, even if I can look it up on AI, like you're paying a consultant for, hey, like let's go face to face, grab, food after this and like developing that relationship where it's like the human aspect of it is like, you're doing the work. Could it maybe be done by AI? Maybe. But also like, you're working with someone and just being a good person and doing business with people you like. So, like I said, I think that will always be there. So yeah, would love, obviously you were at Indian River College, you started studying computer science, then you went on to Florida State, kind of just like what you were thinking there. Did you have any idea? Obviously you're probably doing the band and everything. Like, what was that like? Where was your head at of like, hey, this is my career? Did you have any of that figured out? Or were you just like, going through the motions, trying to figure it out? Like,
Yeah, no, I was trying to figure it out, to go back to that band. What really grabbed me to want to be in computer science and tech was when the guitarist from the band had the first Apple Macintosh, the 512K.
yeah.
And a year later, he got the newest model called the Macintosh SE, which was the second Macintosh ever. It looked exactly the same. It had the same keyboard and the same mouse and it was in the same box. The only thing different was the tag on the front, like the little tag you pop off and you could just stick another one on there. Right. That was the only thing different. I said, what's the difference between this one and that one? Back then I didn't know what Moore's law was. Right. And he said, oh, this new one is 4 of those. And then I went, holy moly, like, that makes sense that it's just going to keep growing in power. And that's Moore's law, which means, if you're not familiar, is, computational power will double every year at half the cost. Right. So the velocity, and you're seeing it with NVIDIA play out. Intel 15, 20, 30 years ago, but AMD and NVIDIA now, some of their processing is just, making huge gains in computing power and capacity and at less cost. Right. So I just thought this stuff's never going away. I'm always going to have a job if I want it. And that's kind of why, and I was interested in it, being kind of a little bit of a nerd coming from the Atari and tech background. So I thought, geez, I want to get in and learn this stuff. And, I started out programming, this vibe coding thing is pretty awesome. I was horrible at programming. I wasn't good at it. I worked at Florida Power and Light for a stint there on a development team. And what took me 2 days, the person next to me could do in 8 minutes. And I was like, for whatever reason, I was always really good at math, but I just wasn't good at programming. But I'm not a really good writer. I'm pretty good at editing, but I don't consider myself like I'd struggle if I had to write a small book, right? Like I have all the thoughts in my head, but getting it on the paper is the tough part for me, kind of writer's block. It's kind of built into my DNA. So I decided to pivot and get into network engineering because even with AI, even with the cloud, at the end of the day, you still got to get to all of it. And how do you do that? You do that via networks. And now they're mostly wireless networks. But the backbone of those networks are all still fiber, wireless to an extent now, right? Especially when Elon talks about putting data centers in space, it's all wireless at that point. Uh, but yeah, just it's never going away. Tech's going to be here forever, and you'll have ringside seats to be able to see the convergence of artificial intelligence, high speed wireless networks, quantum computing, and then bake in some robotics. And this world's going to be, get your popcorn ready for about 20 or 30 years from now. It's going to be really interesting to see. So you're going to have a ringside seat.
Yeah, I'm super excited to see, what's going to happen. Like you said, it's, genuinely this future's the limit. especially in the US. And there's going to be a lot of regulation and all of that stuff. So I know a lot of it's like, hey, we need to beat China in the AI race. And, there's so many anti-data center sentiment in the US where it's like, I get it. But even then I see a lot of stuff. It's like, hey, who's funding these protests? Is it China? Who knows, honestly?
Yeah, very short-sighted, and not to go down any of those kind of roads, but well, data centers are they really that disruptive? We need power, right? So, okay, got it, check. But
Yeah.
Trump passed, I think it was Trump, just recently, to where these data centers now can build their own power sources, right? So they're not pulling from the public grid.
Yeah.
And so, fine, put them in that box. You got to build your own power plants. But, in the 80s, I worked at a nuclear power plant at Florida Power and Light. I was in transmission. So in a power system, you got power generation, you got transmission systems. Those go to substations, then distribution, not to go down the utility kind of road there. But nuclear is the best power in the world, man.
Yeah.
Alternative energy, yeah, great. It's really expensive. It's not reliable. It doesn't produce enough power. Someday, will it? Sure. Someday, the clean, most abundant energy source in our known universe is our sun.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, we just can't capture enough of it because solar cells aren't as efficient as they need to be, and we don't really have the storage totally figured out yet. And then if it's rainy and it's sunny day, there's no sun out, you got to have enough storage or a substitute or secondary way to generate power. Now that could be fracking and gas, that could be that coal, or it could be, but nuclear is almost unlimited, clean. The reactors today, I think between Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island, like 26 people died, and not at 3 Mile Island, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were all at Chernobyl, and it was really because of the explosion, not even because, all these studies have been done. It wasn't from radiation where they thought people couldn't live there for 1,000 years. That just hadn't played out. But now, with all the new tech, the reactors are smaller, they're buried down, they can't fly planes into them, they're just much safer. So we need to get that clear, but that's all a separate discussion. But so China building 300 nuclear reactors, like as we speak. We haven't built 1985.
Yeah, I think it just goes to regulation and all of that. And definitely you can get
That's
down.
The power plants, you got to cool them with water, but it's not like the water's going away. They're just cooling it like a radiator in your car.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're bad, but who knows?
Yeah, honestly, I think, and that's why you see people like
living, so I might be a little biased.
I like Bloom Energy is one of my favorite investments, but I digress. So you started after college, you worked at Ready Prompt Computing for about a year before obviously starting your own business, but would love to kind of hear your head, where were you at there? How'd you like it? Obviously you ended up leaving, a year and a half in, but kind of your story.
That was it was installing financial systems like accounting systems for small and mid-sized companies. An old DOS-based platform called ACPAC Plus that was owned by Computer Associates. It just didn't interest me setting up chart of accounts and doing that kind of accounting work. My father was a CPA. I have a pretty extensive finance background, but I definitely, when it gets into the chart of accounts and debits and credits and posting here and setting up SKUs in the system, it just didn't excite me, honestly. So that's why I pivoted.
Awesome. Yeah. So you pivoted. What was kind of the tipping point for that?
I just knew I didn't want to be in accounting systems. Just was bored. I had an opportunity to move to Atlanta to start an IT business at the time, computer networking business. It literally, swallowed the red pill and decided to move from South Florida up to Atlanta. The Olympics were coming. The city was growing. I was able to nobody had computer networks or local area networks, not even wide area networks or the internet at that point. And so I thought it'd be a good place to plant my flag for me, my wife, and my family. And was able to ride the Atlanta growth wave. Atlanta's 3 times the size now that it was, 30 years ago. So 50% of probably my success was to ride in the wave.
Yeah. Hey, you got to be lucky enough to be in the water though, and like putting yourself there. And so did you have kids when you started DynaSis? And would love just like an overview for the audience. I'll explain, what DynaSis is, but if you can, give the very brief overview for the audience, that'd be great too.
No, didn't have kids yet. Started the company in early 1993 on literally December 21st, which is actually my first. I have two children. Son is 29 and a daughter is 23. It's my son's birthday.
Oh,
He was
wow.
he was born 3 years later, but I met my wife Kim in high school, so we're high school lovers. Now that we're in our mid and me late 50s. Uh, so yeah, we didn't have any kids, no mortgage payment, no car payments, so wasn't a lot of risk back then because I had people all the time. How'd you do it? I'm like, I just didn't take a paycheck for 18 months. So
Yeah.
my wife worked and she put food on the table and paid the rent at the apartment. We had one car and shared it. So I'd drive her to work every day over to Marietta, 45 minutes each way, and then I'd go on sales appointments and fixing, installing computer networks during the day, and then pick her up after work at night. But, we didn't know any different, right? So it sounds like, walking 3 miles barefooted in the snow. But at the time, we were just trying to get our piece, and it worked out for us.
Totally. And how do you even like start a business? How do you start like an IT, consulting business for, small to medium businesses? Like, how did you do it? Did you think about it? Obviously you did, but like, did you have a business plan? Was it just yourself? Like, what did you do there to just like, figure it out?
Yeah, it was actually me and a brother-in-law. We were together in business for maybe not quite 2 years, and then he split off. He did the whole accounting software thing and then built a hosting company based on accounting software and exited that business and did very, very well. So
Oh,
he's a
wow.
very successful man.
And that's Kim's brother.
No, that's my older sister, Debbie, who actually passed away 19 years ago. It was her husband. His name was Stan. Then at DynaSis, I actually brought Chad into the business. That was Kim's brother, my wife's brother. And he, ran the sales side of the business for DynaSis as we grew and scaled that. And then, he was also part of Novatech, a big reason for our success that we had. But yeah, I would like to say it was, the knowledge I have now is go to the market and find people that are looking for what you do, which can be depending on, how many buyers are out there, right? It's like fishing, is there a lot of fish or not a lot of fish, right? Fortunately, nobody had computer networks. Everybody needed computer networks and file servers and, then internet connections and then email, the mission critical application that came out in 1995. People had I have to have email, Dave. And so we kind of, we just lucked out and found the reef and where all the fish were. So, prospecting was easier for us. Honestly, we'd pick up the phone. We'd literally there were people didn't even have voicemail sometimes back then. We'd make phone calls and we'd get a business owner on the phone or a chief financial officer. We'd say, hey, you have any interest in getting a computer network? Oh, we just got one put in 6 months ago. Okay, what about servicing it? What about maintaining it? What about upgrading it? We'd love to send you some information and come, tell you about what we do. And it was just, like making sausage, honestly. But we were at the right place at the right time. You know what I mean? Like that definitely helped. And I'm very transparent in that because other industries now, they're tough. Being an MSP today, it's a tough business. Now, can you still grow it and scale it? Absolutely. It's a little bit harder than it was, 33 years ago when I started it. But meaning there's a certain amount of buyers in the marketplace and, and everybody's going to be a buyer eventually. You just don't know when. Usually it's when they have an impending event. So really what you want to do when you go to market in any business is, figure out who your ideal client profile is, who's the customer we want to sell to.
Mm-hmm.
Let them know who you are, what you do, be top of mind, and then follow up with sales calls and try to book as many sales meetings and build a pipeline and, you'll scale and grow a business. So there, everybody thinks it's this magic and we can't figure it out. And to me, it's all very easy and simple. We just need to talk to 2,500 businesses that we think would be great customers and what we do. And over the next 6 months to 18 months, a bunch of them are going to have a need for what we do. And hopefully they call us in and probably one or two others. And we got to go and then outcompete those.
Totally.
Companies,
That's exactly what me and my brother are trying to do right now is obviously do M&A advisory. And it's just like, a lot of these businesses, whether it's IT MSP, healthcare MSSPs, industrial businesses, like, just trying to be top of mind and, putting out informational stuff like, hey, this is what we do. This is what we're seeing in the market because, obviously it might be a little different sale, but, same thing. It's super important. And you want to be top of mind and just show them, hey, this is what we can do. And, just kind of a sales number. We're going to try to do a lot of our selling in person nowadays because obviously we're on Zoom right now, but we feel like a good way is just like taking owners out to lunch and, developing that relationship in person and saying, hey, like, we're real people, as you probably were doing a lot of that, in the 90s in Atlanta, if I could imagine.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a great strategy. So when we were at Novatech, we had the luxury of meeting with people in person, which was our model. Then COVID, we had to do for a year or two. We did most of our selling over Zoom meetings, Teams meetings, and we found that in-person sales appointments converted to sales 2x, twice as much as Zoom meetings. Now, could we still sell them over calls like this? Absolutely, but it wasn't nearly as effective. So getting in the conference room, shaking a hand, having a beer, taking somebody to lunch is definitely a better way to go for sure.
Totally. That's what our thesis is. We kind of just need, those one or two people to be like, hey, I got my start by letting someone, take a risk on me. Like we're hoping the same. And then from there, just going above and beyond. And, the rest is up to your fate. So that's what we're doing. And so would love to kind of like learn a little more about, hey, like, you're getting this business off the ground, email comes into play, you're figuring all this out. Like, how are you managing growing a team, doing sales, making sure you're doing good work as well? And just like being a business owner, like, how did you do that? Obviously, you're doing it on the fly, but like, what was the hardest part for you? What was the easiest and whatnot? So, yeah, I know that's a lot.
Yeah, an MSP business is it's a tough business, right? And most of them are, but it's definitely I don't even want to say harder than selling pencils, but it's probably not, honestly. I don't know anything about the pencil business, but it's a difficult business. So, going and finding the customers, every customer needs what we did in the IT services and the MSP business. Everybody needs it, right? But a lot of times they already have an MSP and they might not even care for them, but the devil they know is better than the devil they don't know, right? And so you got to, over time, convince them that you're worth that leap of faith, right? You're a better option. And how do you do that? Well, you do it via case studies and partnerships with some of the bigger vendors and, have really knowledgeable people and create thought leadership content, and then over time, it's for lack of a better word, I joke in meetings or did that I'd call it propaganda, right? Like, you don't want to, lie and overly embellish by any means, but you definitely want to say, here's what we've done. Here's the things we do. Here's the customers that are successful, and build that trust. And then, hopefully educate the person you're trying to sell to what it is you do better than your competitors, right? And, having a unique or a couple of uniques or being a little bit of a differentiator, we found was always a good thing. So you don't look like every other MSP in the market. And so that was, part of the strategy. But then once you get the customers, you got to be able to deliver. So I'm actually going through an issue right now with my car. Is my lane departure system got out of whack. I was told I needed a new windshield. I replaced it. It didn't fix the car. I had to bring the car back to the manufacturer. And, the company that told me they could fix the issue couldn't. Right. Well, when I ran my business, if I told the customer I was going to do something and we didn't do it, or our team dropped the ball, I would always be accountable. I had situations where I had to buy an extra server or two for the customer, and it cost us $14,000 out of our pocket, but if you want to be a great business and a great brand, be accountable, be truthful, be transparent, and you'll keep customers. So keeping the customers once you get them is huge, because it costs a lot more money to get a new customer than it does to keep an existing customer. Right. So, there's a kind of an evolution to it, right? Getting them, I call that rev ops, marketing and sales, getting the customers, getting them or getting it. Then, delivery, right? Your service delivery, and then the finance part of that. There's kind of three phases to the game, just like, offense, defense, and special teams in football. So many years of trying to figure it out, but I think by now I've cracked the code a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. That was super insightful. And so you guys are now like, growing. Let's say it's about early 2000s, 2002. Like, how big's your team? How many people are you hiring? Like, do you like hiring? How is that for you? Like, what's kind of your role as a leader and kind of like visionary?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, in 2005, 2010, we were probably 20, 25 employees, grew that to 65. And then when we became part of the bigger organization where I was president of Novatech, we had 650 employees.
Wow.
So definitely was able to learn and see the scale and be part of that.
Hmm.
I would say for the most part, me, and if anybody knows me and listens to this, they'll laugh at this, but I'm very non-confrontational. So I personally didn't like managing people, but I had to. One way I was able to figure it out is to really care about people, right? And some people will be like, "Oh, you never do that," and then people take advantage of you. Well, you got to develop a thick skin and have the BS detector on at all times, right? But if you find really good people and you help them and help their families, that's a force multiplier. Culture is everything in a company. And I've worked with people on big management teams that when you talk about culture, they don't get it. I can walk in any business and immediately within 30 seconds tell you if they have a good culture or a bad culture
Hmm.
just by the looks on people's faces, the body language, how they treat you, and look at Chick-fil-A, right? That's leadership. That's culture. That's hiring the right people, right? And
Hmm.
training them on why all that matters, right? And that's why Chick-fil-A is a crazy company on how it's operated, and how they've grown and, how fast they went from like 1 billion to 25 billion in like 20 years, which is like crazy growth, right? And so culture's everything. I found the younger folks in your age group, and you're more Gen Z than you're millennial,
Hmm.
but you know what? A lot of Gen Xers, like me, my generation, would take shots at the millennials, right? And I'd be like, nah, you don't understand. Well, they want to bring their dog to work. I'm like, yeah, okay, fine, who cares, right? Like at the end of the day, what I always loved about millennials that work for me is they actually gave a shit. They cared about the business. It wasn't all about the money. Now you had to pay them fairly, but it was really about being part of the mission and being in
Totally.
the meetings and understanding where the company wants to go and to help us get there. And I always love that about the younger generations. My generation was all about the paycheck,
Totally.
right? I need to earn more money. How much vacation time do I get? 80-20 rule, right?
Yeah.
80,
Yeah.
nothing's ever, finite, all one or the other. But
Totally.
so I found that culture it worked well in every generation, but getting people to be part of the mission, telling them where you're going as a company, ask their opinion, get their advice, right? They're dealing with customers on a daily basis. I'm insulated by like 4 layers of management. What do you think, Bob, Brenda? And literally bake that into the delivery to the customer, right? And it's a force multiplier. I mean, I think, you know, I've known some micromanagers that think, I got to do it all myself and it's always me and I'm the smartest person in the room.
Hmm.
Dude, give me 10 people that friggin' want to learn and are willing to follow and be part of the team. And I'm going to hire 10 people that are smarter than me in the room. You know what I
Totally.
mean? And I'm going to do my best to lead them. And when I say lead, I don't mean that in a bad way.
Hmm.
Most, you know, Winston Churchill and Patton were probably born leaders. 95% of it's a learned trait.
Totally.
You learn how to lead. And that's just being clear, concise, direct, communicating properly,
Hmm.
doing performance reviews, telling people where they stand so they're not wondering at night, am I going to get laid off this weekend or next week or next month because we had a
Yeah.
bad, just being very transparent. But I find culture is the most powerful thing in any organization. Any.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. Having, people care. I had another interview this morning and he's just like, heard the exact same thing as yourself, like, having the right people on the bus. I read like Good to Great recently. And it's just
Yeah.
like, if you got the right people on the bus and they care about the mission, like, you want to do a new product offering or, you want to switch completely, like that doesn't matter. They care about you and the business. You're going to be able to find that direction and, the business is going to hopefully make a killing and, you take care of them and they'll take care of you and a win-win for everyone.
Yeah. I found when you get up every day figuring out how to make the people that work in your organization that you own, you get up every day and go, how can I make them more money? It's really powerful, man.
Yeah.
Powerful. How can I give them more vacation days? How can I give them a better quality of life? How can I get them better health insurance if I can? Right? Like
Yeah.
you'll have people that will we'll charge the hill with you. You know what I mean? And they'll stay. And right, that's the most important thing, especially in a tech company, B2B tech company, is when they stay, they have lots of knowledge. They know your customers. They know the customers' environments. They build personal relationships with your customers. They go to Braves games together. I mean, I had employees go to Braves games with customers. I mean, that is powerful in business. And it wasn't not, it's totally genuine. I mean, I figured it out, but it was everything from some of it's engineered. When I say engineered is every Friday at 2, I had on my calendar to write an email to the whole company and say, here's what happened good this week. Here's what didn't go so well. And here's what we're doing. And I just, it took me 15 to 20 minutes every Friday at 2:00. I did it for 15 years. I sent out the email.
Yeah.
Why? So everybody, I think sometimes when you get into management positions, you think everybody's in the know, and they're not. The more I could tell everybody, here's what's going good, here's what's going bad, here's new customers we signed. Oh, geez, by the way, we lost this customer because for this reason, and we got to get better at that, and just communicate, right? Like it's not rocket science, in my opinion, but it is a learned trait. You figure it out, right?
Yeah, exactly. You'll mess up, and you probably had some big mess ups, but you learn from that. You make it better. You learn from other people too, and then take best practices from this, that, and the other, and kind of put your own spin on it as well. So yeah, no, it's super helpful. So now it's mid 2010s. You guys are growing. Let's say you're 40, 50 employees. Obviously, you're probably getting reached out to acquisitions, like kind of like where's your head at? You're growing the business obviously day by day, but
over time we started servicing larger customers. We actually found the bigger customers, you didn't need as many of them. There was a little bit more complexity from a technology standpoint, but you weren't dealing with the business owner a lot of times. You were dealing with the controller or the CFO, and it wasn't their money, so they weren't as emotional about it. You know what I mean? You get out of the SMB space is a slugfest, right? That's Bob's money. He's got 10 employees. He wants to take his family to Disney next year, and you're getting in the way of that. No, I'm serious.
Yeah.
They're good people, but that's, when you're smaller and you're in the business, you're working in the business, not on the business. I want to deal with companies that are owned by people that are working on the business, not in it, because they're just not as emotionally attached when something goes a little off the tracks a little bit, if that makes sense. So we started, getting bigger customers, regional customers, offices in the bigger cities like Charlotte, Nashville, Atlanta, Jacksonville, Orlando, was part of our strategy. But, we just kept growing the company, building it, hiring new employees, hiring more sales reps, hiring more technicians, hiring more people on the accounting team because we had more revenue, more customers. So doing more billing, you just kept adding positions to the team just wherever you kind of needed it. Right. But, we weren't looking to sell when we were actually approached by a private equity firm, the oldest private equity firm in the South. And, we weren't looking to sell. We had a good operationally mature MSP dropping best in class EBITDA to the bottom line. And, but they said, hey, we want you to be part of it. We want you to reinvest. We want you to be president of the company and help us get to where we want to go collectively. And that was at 50 years old. That was very intriguing to me. I could de-risk some, take some chips off of the table. God forbid if another 9/11 happened or, we went to war in Iran. That's probably a bad joke, but you know what I mean? You don't know what's going to happen in the world.
Exactly.
I mean, COVID. And thank God I had already transacted and still had chips in the game, but it was 15, 20% of my chips, not 100% of my chips. Yeah. I think I had a heart attack during COVID. It ended up, all the companies that I know in the MSP industry actually did well with COVID for a couple of different reasons. One, employees went mobile. And so they needed more cybersecurity technologies and more services and, that kind of thing. So it ended up working out. But de-risking and getting with a bigger partner and having some war chest of investment money behind you to go do 11 acquisitions in 5 years was a lot of fun. I mean, I was on a lot of planes and a lot of nice Marriott hotel rooms eating, some nice steaks here and there. But we worked our tails off, man, 60, 70 hours a week, doing 11 acquisitions and 11 integrations. Finding them's the easy part. Getting them all integrated and everybody in the same core values and culture and technology systems. And that's tough sledding. But we were pretty successful at it.
Yeah, definitely. And would love kind of for you to share to the audience, like what it's like, getting acquired, kind of like your feelings around that. I feel like you've obviously helped that's happened twice for you, but at least with, your baby DynaSis, like, was it exciting, stressful, like kind of that whole acquisition process, like at a high level would be great for the audience.
Yeah, it's stressful, especially if you haven't done it. Now, once you've done it once, then you kind of understand the path, right? You've been down the path, and you know what to expect. The hardest thing was due diligence, right? That's, I'd rather go see the doctor 10 times, or get a root canal 10 times and go through due diligence with a private equity firm, right? Not an angel investor. Private equity firms, their due diligence is crazy extensive because part of their model is to hire Ernst and Young and, all these other attorneys and HR type attorneys. And is they do that to make sure they were very proactive in their approach and very thorough. So if the investments go bad, they can say it wasn't us, right? Ultimately, that's what they're looking for. But it's good, but it's expensive and it's very tough, right? To go through, especially when you're the company being acquired. But yeah, it was, the anxiety is once you go to close, it's like closing on a house. If you are going and buying a car where you fill out all the paperwork, then you sit around and go, okay, I just signed my name over to somebody else and they own my company and I don't have my check yet.
Yeah. Where
So
is
it
it?
took about a day and a half to get the deposit, right? The proceeds wired in. That's longer than usual. They ran into a problem with a routing number, but you're at night. I didn't get a whole lot of sleep, right? Like,
Yeah.
they handed them the keys to the car. They own it legally. And I got nothing. I got this pen that my attorney that I paid a bunch of money. You know what I mean? Like that was, I didn't sleep much that night.
Yeah.
But sure enough, very great company. I have nothing but great things to say about the private equity firm Trivest that I dealt with. I still talk to them. I still help them here and there and give them a little bit of free advisement when they look at tech companies. As friends, they're great for me and my family. I highly, highly, highly recommend them. They tend to be more of a hands off. As long as you're hitting your numbers, they ain't going to meddle with you too much. But I had a great experience. But then, prepping to sell it the second time, we sold to a family office and, dealing with Stevens, the investment banker, and putting together a 90-page SIM and then hiring LEK to put together a research document on the state of the industry. This document was, 90 pages and probably cost close to $1 million to develop. Don't ask how, I'm in the wrong business. It's just a sonata research. I mean, they did a lot of work, don't get me wrong, but
Yeah.
But that kind of goes hand in hand with the SIM, to say, hey, this is a valid industry and here's the data on that and what that looks like. And we interviewed their customers and their employees and they're a good company and it's all good stuff, but it's just part of the process.
Totally.
But that one was a little bit different because we were, a much bigger company with an investment banker. When we did our deal, my company, me and my partner, we did our deal. We didn't hire an investment banker. We just went and found an acquisition accountant and attorney and kind of drove the process. I don't know if I would recommend that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
And, one of the reasons is when you get an investment banker, they find multiple people interested to buy and they create competitive pressure, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
That, probably could have yielded maybe a little better result, but we were treated very fairly. It was a win-win at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. I feel like it's always hey, is, paying Stevens totally worth it? Obviously you guys were a lot smaller scale, but, say I'm charging you 10% if I'm a investment bank, and it's, $10 million transaction, that's $1 million in their pocket, give or take. So it's like, hey, with the competition, is it worth, the, extra 5% you're going to give away? Who knows? That's why me and my brother are trying to do, cheaper model, more aligned with the seller, where it's like, hey, we're only winning if you win. Otherwise, you can get all your money back. So,
that's a great offering. I mean, I would say when I talk to Stevens in investment banking, I'm talking to companies that were 50 million probably, right? Like, where, the PE guys, I mean, that's just who they're going to use, those type companies, right? But I think for, smaller mid-sized companies that are selling for, 5, 10, 15, 20 million, that's probably not a great model, right? Because it's very, but yeah, I agree.
Totally. And okay, so I know we're coming up a little bit on time, but would love to kind of just hear, like, when you joined Novatech after the acquisition, you alluded 11 acquisitions on the plane. end up selling to a family office. Just, what was it like being the number two? Obviously, you had a great mentor above you as CEO, but, just completely different for you. And yeah, I would love to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So the guy that I reported into, I have a ton of respect for. He's very smart. He came from a different industry. The other thing is I was an entrepreneur, so I'm about taking risk. He was a professional business manager, and he was hired by the private equity firm. I actually interviewed him and gave my opinion on if we should hire or not. I signed off, of course. I don't know if it would have mattered at the end of the day. He was an industry leader and ran a $2 billion company before he came to Novatech. But his job there was to be slow and smooth and fast. Don't take a lot of risk. Drive EBITDA, grow the company, go find acquisitions. You know what I mean? And I'd come from being an entrepreneur, taking on a lot of risks. So we clash heads here and there. For the most part, he would explain to me why. Like, here's why we got to do it this way and not do it that way. And I learned a ton from that. That's why I said he's the only mentor I ever had. I mean, he smacked me around from time to time, and I probably deserved all of it, honestly. But it was all good and healthy learning, if that makes sense. When I look back on it, I go, geez, like, I mean, I was able to learn from a master Jedi. You know what I mean? Like Jedi Knight. Like, you don't get those opportunities that often, probably.
Yeah.
I mean, he was already pretty successful. And so there wasn't a lot of posturing or any of the bullshit that maybe some people deal with. The politics, he's a very down to earth, pragmatic operations. Even though he came from a sales background, he had a pretty heavy operations background.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was great to learn that, I look to pivot some of the things I learned into advising and helping MSPs, and also advising and helping private equity firms buy MSPs in the future. Kind of all the phases, 3 phases of the game, right? Offense, defense, special teams. And I was able to fill in a lot of gaps by being a smaller business with 65 employees, and then being the president of a company with 650 employees in 11 states with 28 locations. That's a whole different. Now, we didn't get there overnight. Like, I didn't wake up the next day. We had that. That was 11 acquisitions of Bolton, integrating and scaling and building the business. But it's awesome. I mean, love it.
Yeah. No. What was the hardest part about that?
I think adopting other companies' cultures. Depending on who the other owner was. Typically, we'd like them to stay around forever or for a bit, but everybody manages differently. And so, we had a couple acquisitions where the employees would go home at 2 on Fridays, and you know what I mean? They just wouldn't go on the amount of sales calls or run as many service calls as they should. And
yeah,
they have it, they're probably overpaid or market rate paid, given 70% of the productivity that they need to be. And when you go to them and try to explain those things to them, it's a little bit of uphill battle, if that makes sense. And so, I don't know how you get around that, especially in a market where it's hard to find acquisitions. And so if it was a good company and it was profitable and they had good people, they just maybe were a little complacent. We just thought we could skin that cat. But that was probably the toughest part, trying to mash together. You got to imagine at Novatech, I mean, we got offices in Dallas, Texas, and Fort Worth. And if you think those are night and day, if you've ever been to Fort Worth, in the stockyards, that's a whole different town. That's 25, 30 minutes down the road than Dallas, Texas. But then you're dealing with the sales reps in Dallas, Texas, where it's a little more snooty. Dallas, TV show Dallas.
Yeah.
And you're dealing with some good old folks outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. They're all part of the same company and the same culture. That's got to be managed a little bit differently than if everybody, when I had my company, I had the luxury of everybody was in Atlanta. You know what I mean? And 90% of our customers were in Atlanta. That's a lot simpler than, building a national, I don't even see, these national companies I just have mad respect for, because this country, the United States, could be 5 countries, right?
Oh, yeah.
We're just so different in different parts of the, corners of the country that, it's, that was probably the most challenging thing. But it all worked out in the end, a couple people didn't make it. Either they decided to, pull the ripcord, or we decided to deselect them. But for the most part, everybody kind of adapted. It just takes a little bit of, more baking it in the oven,
Yeah, no, definitely. And obviously you guys exited to perpetual capital, obviously great outcome for everyone. All those acquisitions. And, obviously you're kind of advising independent sponsors on acquisitions and all that stuff. And, you know, like I said, getting bored and finding stuff to do. So, it seems like you're up to a lot of good stuff now. So would love to kind of, wrap it up here. And one question that I always try to ask people like yourself is, obviously you've had a super successful career. How much of your success do you contribute to, hard luck or hard work? And how much do you contribute to, luck and, being in computer software and IT stuff in the early 90s? How much of it do you contribute to just working your butt off, working those 70 hours a week?
Yeah, I'd cut it into a couple of different things. One is, moving to a growing city in Atlanta with the Olympics coming. Two is being in a position where technology and computer networking was just taking off, and I was a computer network engineer, right? Probably right place, right time.
Yeah.
The most important thing, honestly, is I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and I think the Lord has helped me along the way. There's no doubt in my mind. I've seen it. And then, the hard work, I think, that's the one thing that's table stakes. Like, you got to work hard, especially if you're building something and you're young. You got to give effort. You got to put in the time. I tell my son all the time that, you don't have a wife yet. You don't have kids yet. You don't have a mortgage payment yet. Now's the time to grind. Grind in your 20s and 30s. And then you can take your foot off the gas a little bit in your 40s, because now you're on the management team and you're leading and directing and managing a team of usually younger professionals, not always the case. And then, once you get in your 50s, hopefully you're using more of your brain and your knowledge and not out there grinding it all the time, right? And so there's kind of a progression to it. If you stair step that ladder, think consultancy, right? I mean, even though most companies don't operate like that, when it comes to that ladder, it's very similar, I think. You become an analyst and then a project lead, and then, you know what I mean? You're managing customer accounts, and there's a progression to it. Same thing in private equity. It operates similar as a consultancy.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think every corporate ladder, that's why it's called the corporate ladder, is similar, right? So believe it or not, if you grind when you're young and you're a little bit lucky and you say your prayers, you know what I mean? And being in an industry that's in demand, that's a big thing I tell young folks all the time, is get into something the world needs.
Totally.
Don't go sell typewriters. World doesn't need typewriters, man. You know what I mean? Like, go get into, you don't have to get into tech. Become a nurse. The world needs nurses.
Mm-hmm.
We need welders. We need shipbuilders. We need, you with me? We need chefs. We need, there's all sorts of jobs in the physical world. Or if you want to get into tech, get into AI. Learn how to leverage AI at the end of the day as a tool, like a backhoe. There was a time 100 years ago, if you wanted to dig a railway or dig a ditch or dig a road out, put in a new road, you had 100 guys and ladies, probably not too many ladies, but I don't want to be. I use guys interchangeably because I'm old school, which I know I need to adapt to that. You had 100 people out, probably prisoners or, low wage labor with shovels. And then they invented the backhoe. And then one guy learned how to operate the backhoe. Be that guy. Be the forklift guy. Be that guy, the crane operator guy when it comes to AI. Not the guy, again, interchangeably, or lady. I mean, it's amazing in tech. I watched it go from 0 females in tech to 20, 30% female in tech. And it's been kind of fun to see.
Yeah.
They're bringing a whole different vibe and take, and I'll say level of maturity to the business sector, the tech sector. And a good, so it's been fun to watch that. My daughter's in it, doing it. So
that's great. Awesome. And last question here is what excites you for the future?
I want to stay healthy. I've had some health issues. All's good right now. I try to, because I want to, I'm 57 now, and I see what happens the next 20 to 30 years. So it's, you guys got your young folks, I call folks, I've been in the South too long. Young generations, you got your work cut out for you. I mean, besides AI and then robotics and quantum computing we talked about, in general, was a capitalistic system, and I'm a capitalist. I don't know if that's a good thing. And so somehow you guys are going to have to figure out, what does that look like? Because I don't believe in socialism either, but there's got to be some new level of a government created where, there's some level of product, you know what I mean? Like, it'll be interesting to watch how that plays out. But just seeing robotics, are we going to make it to Mars in my lifetime? Probably not. Be cool to build a base and go to the moon someday. Some of the advances in healthcare is amazing.
Mhm.
Having, been sick, I've studied technology and protocols in healthcare, and what we've learned in the last 10 years is more than we learned in the last 1,000 in just healthcare, right? And so with DNA and genomes and, you know what I mean? And leveraging technology. So I don't know. It's going to be fun to see, but traveling the world, I got a couple trips planned in Asia and Europe and
Nice.
South America in about a year and a half. And so I want to travel and enjoy my kids and hopefully get grandkids. And I know it sounds like I'm over the Rainbow Bridge. I'm not there yet, but
Yeah, I
we
love it.
are all terminal and I'm on the 14th hole. I can see
Yeah.
the clubhouse. So
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Dave, really appreciate you coming on and share your story. It's incredible. And yeah, thanks so much.
all right. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
See ya.
All right. That's it for today's episode of The Making of, hosted by Jack Pitts. I really enjoyed this conversation with Dave. He's built, sold, acquired, integrated, and operated businesses at a scale that very few people ever get to experience. But I think my biggest takeaway was actually pretty simple. Get into something the world needs, work hard while you have the opportunity to, surround yourself with great people, and understand that there's always going to be a little bit of luck involved along the way. Huge thanks to Dave for coming on and sharing his story. If you enjoyed the episode, please follow the podcast, give us a 5-star, and I'll see you on the next one.